I never thought a phone call could ruin everything I believed about my life. But that morning, it did. The sun had just started streaming through the kitchen windows when I poured myself a cup of chamomile tea. It was quiet. Too quiet, even for a Wednesday in Vermont. The fridge hummed gently. The floor was cool beneath my feet. And for a moment, I let myself believe the world was still simple. I stood there sipping slowly, trying to remember if I had bought milk the day before. Michael had always reminded me about small things like that. He wasn't perfect. Our marriage had its cracks, but he was my husband. We'd been together for 7 years. We had routines, shared meals, a rhythm that I thought meant we were okay.
Then the phone rang. It was one of those old landline phones with a shrill, jarring tone. I nearly spilled my tea as I rushed to pick it up. "Hello," I said, balancing the receiver on my shoulder. "Is this Mrs. Bennett?" The voice was male, formal, hesitant. "Yes," I replied, suddenly alert. My fingers tightened around the ceramic cup. "Who's this?" I'm calling from North Valley Medical. I'm afraid I have some difficult news. Your husband, Michael Bennett, he was in a car accident. This morning, he didn't make it." For a second, I thought I'd misheard him. I waited for another sentence, something to soften the blow, to make it less real. But it didn't come. Only silence and the sound of something sharp breaking inside me. "What?" I whispered. "No, there must be a mistake. Michael just left for his business trip last night. You sure I'm very sorry, ma'am." The man continued, and I could tell he was struggling too. "There's more you should know." My heart was pounding. My knees felt weak. Sat down slowly at the kitchen table, the chair legs scraping across the tiles like a scream. "What? What else?" "He wasn't alone in the car," the man said. "There was. A woman. She also died at the scene." I didn't say anything. "We identified her as a woman named Erin Mitchell. We believe she was involved with your husband." A sound left my throat dry, breathless and unfamiliar. Not quite a gasp, not quite a cry. He hesitated again, and I already knew what was coming, like watching a nightmare unfold in slow motion. "We discovered they have children. Twin daughters. They're 6 years old. Their next of kin is unclear. We're reaching out to extended family, but we thought you should know." I dropped the cup, shattered against the floor, the tea staining the tiles like old blood. My hand was trembling, my whole body shaking with a cold that had nothing to do with the temperature. Michael had children, twin daughters, with another woman. And I never knew. The world spun. The walls seemed to tilt, and I had to grip the edge of the table just to keep myself grounded. My ears rang. My vision blurred. The man kept talking. He said something about legal procedures. It's about next steps. But his voice was just noise now, like static in a room that no longer felt like mine. I don't remember hanging up. I don't remember how long I sat there, staring at the broken porcelain on the floor. Minutes, hours. Maybe I only remember one thought pulsing in my head like a drumbeat. Michael was dead. And he had lied to me about everything. How could I have been so blind? He wasn't just unfaithful. He had an entirely separate life. A woman, children, secrets so big they could crush me. And they did, over and over, like waves that wouldn't stop. Eventually, I forced myself to move. I swept up the shards, tossed the tea-soaked towel into the sink, and stared out the window at the street we used to walk together. It looked the same, calm, normal. But I wasn't. Not anymore. I kept replaying the conversation in my head, hoping something had been lost in translation, hoping it was some cruel mistake. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. Michael was gone, and the man I thought I knew had never really existed. There was a knock on the door later that afternoon. A social worker. She had kind eyes, soft words, and 2 terrified girls holding each other's hands behind her. They looked like little ghosts, pale, trembling, too quiet for children that age. I knew their names before she said them. Lily and Grace. I didn't speak. I couldn't. I just looked at them. And something in me cracked. They weren't two. Blame, they were innocent. And now they had no one. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. Not because of Michael, but because of the way Lily had looked at me, hopeful, scared, and somehow trusting, like she was asking for something, even if she didn't know what it was. I didn't know what I would do. If I only knew this, if I turned them away, I'd be no better than the lies he left behind. And I was done living in his shadow. The funeral was small, quiet, almost hollow. Michael's side of the family, what little there was of it, showed up in black suits and stiff handshakes, barely meeting my eyes. Aaron's relatives weren't there. No one claimed the girls. No one stepped forward to speak for them. It was like their parents had vanished, and the world had simply moved on. I stood under a gray sky, the wind tugging at my coat, watching two tiny girls cling to each other beside a casket they were too young to understand. Lily's hand never left Grace's, and Grace didn't look at anything but the grass. They didn't cry. That was what broke me the most. Children should cry when they lose everything. These two had already learned not to. The social worker approached me again after the service. She said they could go into temporary foster care, that there was paperwork, protocols, resources that could be tapped into, but I wasn't really listening. I was staring at Lily's shoes, pink sneakers with a tiny rip along the side. I don't know why that's what made it real for me, not the death, not the betrayal, but that torn little shoe on a girl who had no idea who I was. And yet, something inside me said, don't let them go. So I didn't. That evening, I brought them home. My house wasn't childproof. It smelled like lavender and old wood polish, not crayons and cookies. I had no toys, no extra toothbrushes, no bedtime stories memorized. But I made space. I cleared out the guest room, washed the sheets, and set out two stuffed animals I found in a box from when my niece visited years ago. I had no idea what I was doing, but I couldn't let them disappear into the system. The first few weeks were quiet. Lily asked questions about everything. What time was dinner? Could she have a nightlight? Did I know how to braid hair? Her voice was small but curious. She was trying. Grace, on the other hand, barely spoke. She watched me with wide eyes from behind her sister. She spent hours alone, drawing in a little. Spiral notebook I hadn't even noticed she'd brought. Her sketches were surprisingly good. Houses, trees, animals, always in pencil, always with gentle shading. She never showed them to me, but sometimes she'd leave one on the kitchen counter, folded with no name. I hung them on the fridge anyway. I didn't tell anyone at first, not my coworkers, not my closest friends. Eventually, word got out. A few neighbors gave me odd looks at the grocery store. One coworker whispered, "You're stronger than I'd ever be," as if pity and admiration came in the same breath. But I didn't need their understanding, okay? I just needed the girls to feel safe. I wasn't ready to explain what had happened, or why I'd made the choice I did. The questions would have been endless. Aren't they his lover's kids? Why would you take them in? Don't you feel betrayed? Yes, I felt betrayed, devastated, hollowed out. But I couldn't punish two innocent girls for Michael's lies. They didn't ask to be born into a secret. And the truth was, I needed them. They gave my mornings purpose, my evenings structure. My grief had been shapeless until then. Now it had hands to hold, little shoes to tie, voices calling from the hallway asking if it was okay to open the pantry. They grounded me whether they knew it or not. Of course, not every moment was sweet. There were tantrums, nightmares, silent dinners where no one knew what to say. I burned dinner more than once. Lily cried when I accidentally washed her favorite shirt with bleach. Grace got sick and refused to let me touch her forehead with a thermometer. I doubted myself daily. Was I doing enough? Was I the right person? Would they ever see me as more than the woman their father lied to? I found myself Googling parenting forums late at night. searching for answers in digital threads written by strangers who knew nothing about my life. But every morning, I got up, made breakfast, brushed hair, packed lunches, and tried again. Eventually, things started to shift. Lily began sitting next to me on the couch instead of across the room. Grace started humming when she colored small, tuneless sounds, but sounds. Nonetheless, they began calling me Miss Carolyn at first, then just Carolyn Dot. Then one day, Grace slipped and said, "Mommy," before catching herself. She looked mortified, but I didn't correct her. I just smiled and made pancakes, school, nights, birthday candles, and scraped knees. By the time Lily turned 14, she had already started managing the family grocery list. Grace filled sketchbooks faster than I could keep up with. I wasn't just raising children. I was witnessing them become themselves. Favorite songs in the car. We baked cookies that always came out too hard. We danced in the living room to songs from the radio. I bought bunk beds with stars on the frame. They picked out their own blankets. Lily chose sunflowers. Grace picked deep green. One night, as I tucked them in, Lily whispered, "Do you think Daddy can see us?" I froze. Then I knelt beside her bed and said softly, "Maybe, but I think he'd be proud of how brave you are." She nodded. And that was the last time she ever asked about him for a long while. I still cried sometimes, alone in the laundry room with a towel pressed to my face. The betrayal hadn't vanished, but it was no longer the center of my story. These girls were, and I was no longer just surviving. I was becoming their mother. By the time they graduated high school, our tiny home was full of college brochures and part-time job schedules. Lily got into a state university with a full scholarship in accounting. Grace chose a smaller art school 2 towns over, majoring in interior design. I helped them pack, cried when they left, and celebrated every call that came after. 16 years went by before I realized just how much we had built together, not from blood. Not from names on paper, but from ordinary days stitched together. By love, Lily and Grace grew into young women before my eyes. They each had their own rhythm, their own voice, their own way of being. Lily was steady, focused, drawn to order and structure. She'd always been the one to check her planner twice, to color code her highlighters, to balance a checkbook before she ever got her license. Grace was her mirror opposite, restless, intuitive, sensitive to light and texture and sound. She filled sketchbooks with color, rearranged her room monthly, and dreamed about spaces the way I used to dream about flavors. They were so different, and yet both mine. They called me Mom now. Had slipped into our lives gradually, like the way winter becomes spring. You don't notice the first warm breeze until it's already wrapped around your skin. And I never asked for it. I never dared to expect it. But when it came, it felt right. I kept working, kept saving, kept the house warm and the fridge full. But I let go of a lot of things too. My dreams, mostly. I'd stopped talking about the cafe years ago. There were moments I wanted to bring it up when I saw a vacant storefront or read about a new bakery, but then Grace would need new art supplies. Lily would need gas money for the drive home, and my dreams would quietly fold themselves back into the cupboard. It didn't feel right to want something for myself. Not when college bills and car repairs loomed. Not when late-night tutoring and office janitorial shifts filled every spare hour. Some nights I'd pass by the spice rack and touch the glass jar of cinnamon, wondering if it still smelled the same. But I didn't open it, didn't let myself. We didn't talk much about Michael, not because we avoided him, but because he simply faded. The girls remembered him vaguely, like a distant relative you saw at weddings. A voice, a shadow, a vague outline of someone they might have known. I never gave them details. I didn't want to lie, but I also didn't want to pass on bitterness. But the questions came anyway. One evening, just as the sun was dipping below the maple trees out back, Lily looked up from her dinner and asked, "What was he like?" I paused, my fork frozen in the air. Grace looked at me too, her expression unreadable. Lily clarified, "Our father." I mean, you never really talk about him? I felt my throat tighten, took a sip of water I didn't need, and set the glass down. Carefully. Then I said the only thing I could. He was a complicated man. He loved you, but he made mistakes. Ka? What kind of mistakes? Lily asked. I looked at her face, so much older now, but still carrying the softness of that 6-year-old who once asked if I knew how to braid hair. And Grace sitting quietly across the table, her eyes like questions I wasn't ready to answer. I could have deflected. I could have told them something vague and comforting. But after 16 years, they deserved more than that. Yet another life, I said. He was married to me when you were born. I didn't know about you. I didn't know about Aaron. I found out everything after the accident. The room was quiet. So Grace spoke at last, her voice barely audible. You're not our real mom. My heart cracked open. Slowly, painfully, I reached across the table, taking both their hands in mine. Maybe not by blood, I whispered, but I've loved you every day since the moment you walked through my door. I am your mother in every way that counts. No one said anything. The sound of the clock ticking filled the silence. I waited for them to pull away, but they didn't. Still, the days that followed were hard. There was more silence than usual. No music during dinner, no jokes in the car. Lily grew quiet, retreating into her schoolwork. Grace spent more time outside, sketching under the porch light or disappearing into her room without saying goodnight. I respected their space. I didn't push. I knew they needed time to untangle what they had just learned, what it meant for the lives they thought they understood. A week later, as I was chopping vegetables in the kitchen, Lily came in and leaned against the counter. Her arms were crossed, her face unreadable. Mom, she said softly, I've been thinking. I kept chopping, waiting, about what you told us. About Dad, about everything. I looked up, was angry at first, she said. I thought, why didn't she tell us? Why didn't she just lie? But then I realized you never owed us a fantasy. You gave us a home, a real one. You've always been there, every step. That's what matters. I dropped the knife and pulled her into a hug so tight I thought I'd never let go. The tears came, fast, relief, grief, joy tangled together. I love you so much, I whispered. You and Grace, you're my whole world. Grace stood in the doorway, watching. She didn't speak, but after a moment, she stepped forward and wrapped her arms around us both. We love you too, Mom, she whispered. And just like that, the silence lifted. We didn't erase the past. We didn't pretend the truth hadn't stung. But we stitched something stronger over the wound, something unbreakable. We were a family, and that truth was ours now. The years that followed felt both fast and heavy. We celebrated graduations, endured heartbreaks, got through flu seasons and late-night study sessions. I watched Lily blossom into a young woman who could balance a spreadsheet faster than I could fold a towel. Grace turned her love for sketching into something tangible. She was now studying interior design at a small college 2 towns over. I had done what I promised. I raised them as my own, and yet something in me had gone quiet. I still woke before dawn, made the same breakfast, packed the same lunches, left notes on the fridge when I worked double shifts. My body carried the years, sore knees, dry knuckles, eyes that stayed open too long after midnight. But I never let them see that part. I smiled. I asked about professors and parking tickets. I saved every dollar I could. The idea of my cafe had faded into something private, not quite dead, buried under obligation. Then one night, as we sat around the dinner table, eating Grace's oversalted stir-fry and laughing about it anyway, she put down her fork and asked, Mom, if you could do anything just for you, what would it be? The question landed softly, but hit something deep. I blinked. What do you mean? If you didn't have to think about money or time or anyone else, Grace said, what would you want for yourself? I looked between the two of them, and for the first time in years, I let myself answer truthfully. I used to dream about owning A cafe, I said, almost laughing at the sound of it. A small one, cozy, somewhere people could come and sit and feel like they belonged. I always loved feeding people not just their stomachs, but their hearts. Lily smiled slowly. Why didn't you ever do it? I shrugged. Life, bills, timing, and then I had you, too. You became the dream. They exchanged a look. It was subtle, quick, but I noticed. I didn't think much of it, just assumed they were touched by the sentiment. I didn't know, couldn't have known what they were already planning. Weeks went by, I kept working. They kept smiling in ways that made me suspicious. Grace asked me random questions about paint colors and kitchen layouts. Lily started asking about recipes I hadn't cooked in years. I chalked it up to curiosity. But something was happening. I didn't realize how serious it was until one Sunday afternoon. I came home from the grocery store and found them whispering in the living room with a laptop open between them. When they saw me, they literally jumped hand, slammed it shut. I laughed. What are you two up to? Nothing, they said, in unison, too fast. That's when I knew something was coming. I just didn't know how big it would be. It had started as a joke one evening, Grace, sketching a fake cafe logo on a napkin. Lily running mock numbers on a spreadsheet. But slowly it became real. They set up a joint savings account. Every extra dollar from internships, scholarships, freelance gigs went into it. Even birthday gifts turned into seed money. Behind the scenes, Lily and Grace had been saving not just their paychecks, but their scholarships, their freelance jobs, their birthday money. Grace took on small design gigs. After class, Lily helped a local bakery rework their budget in exchange. For a financial consulting experience, he pulled everything they had. They started scouting locations, quiet streets, little corners anywhere within walking distance from home. They ruled out a dozen buildings before finding it. An old brick storefront with ivy climbing up the side and tall windows that caught the morning light just right. They signed the lease. Lily managed the contracts. Grace started sketching designs. Before the paint was even dry, it made perfect sense. Lily had always been the planner, the organizer, the one who color-coded her entire life. Grace saw the world in layers and palettes. She could make a napkin look like art. Together, they made something beautiful. They wanted it to feel like warm colors, open shelves. It's a kitchen where the oven could be seen from the tables. Vintage. Plates hanging on the wall, a bookshelf near the window for people who like to read alone. A corner booth with a patchwork cushion just like the old armchair. I used to sit in after work. Everything was chosen with care. They kept it a secret for almost months. Had no idea. I was too tired, too busy, too caught up in the rhythm of daily life to notice all the signs until one night. Lily came into my room and said, "Don't make dinner tomorrow. I want to take you somewhere." I raised an eyebrow. "Where? It's a surprise." Next evening, they picked me up in Grace's car. I wore my good shoes, the ones I usually saved for parent-teacher conferences. We drove in silence, both girls grinning too wide. When we pulled up in front of the building, I didn't understand. It was unfamiliar clean, newly painted. A soft yellow light glowed from the windows. A wooden sign hung above the door. And on it, in simple dark letters, was written, "Caroline's Hearth." I stared at it, not breathing. Grace took my hand. "Come on, Mom, let us show you." I followed them, through the front door. The moment I stepped inside, I knew this place wasn't just a gift. It was love. The air smelled of cinnamon and vanilla. Light jazz played from hidden speakers. The counter was polished wood. The shelves lined with jars of tea and fresh herbs. A small group of people stood in the kitchen, waving as we entered, friends, neighbors. Faces I knew and didn't know. This is ... I couldn't finish the sentence. Lily stepped forward, her voice shaking with pride. "It's your cafe, Mom. We built it for you." I covered my mouth with both hands. My legs felt weak. "You gave us everything," Grace said. It was time we gave something back. Tears filled my eyes so quickly I couldn't stop them. I walked around the space, touching the corners, running my hand along the countertop, opening drawers I hadn't even asked for. The oven was the same brand I used in our kitchen. The plates were mismatched on purpose. It was perfect. "I don't know what to say," I whispered. "I don't think I've ever been this surprised in my entire life." Grace smiled. "We hoped it would feel like home." I laughed, wiping at my cheeks. "It does. It absolutely does." And for the first time in a very, very long time, I felt like the dream I gave up on had been waiting for me all along. The grand opening wasn't grand in the way most people might imagine. There were no press releases, no photographers, no influencers waiting to post reviews. It was simple, honest, perfect. The morning of, I wore a navy blue apron with my name embroidered across the chest. Caroline's hearth, a gift from Lily, folded carefully on the front counter. Grace had arranged a bouquet of wildflowers in a mason jar beside the register. And soft morning light poured through the windows just the way she'd imagined when she first saw the building. I stood at the door while guests trickled in, neighbors, friends, people who had seen me at the grocery store for years and never known my name. A woman who remembered me from the Parent-Teacher Association. A man whose mother I used to care for during her hospice days. They smiled, hugged, sat down quietly. The smell of cinnamon rolls and fresh bread wrapped around them like a blanket. Lily managed the register. Grace floated from table to table, adjusting vases and making sure every detail whispered welcome. And I stood behind the counter, hands trembling slightly, until someone ordered the first cup of coffee. Then I moved and everything made sense again. It was like I had stepped into the version of myself I had buried long ago, measuring flour by feel, moving with the rhythm of the kitchen, giving smiles with the food, warmth with every plate. I wasn't just cooking. I was offering pieces of my heart. People lingered. They stayed long after their coffee was cold. They leaned into the windows, reading, laughing, staring out into the sleepy Vermont street like they had found a second home. That night, when we locked the doors and flipped the sign to closed, I stood alone in the center of the cafe, turning in slow circles. It was real. It was mine. And I hadn't done it alone. The days that followed moved in a quiet, beautiful rhythm. Business grew not explosively, but steadily. Word of mouth spread. Someone posted photos online, and soon we had people driving in from the next town to try the peach scones or sit near the bookshelf in the corner. Lily and Grace worked shifts with me when they could. We were a team. Lily took over the books and logistics. Grace redesigned the menu board weekly with hand-lettered chalk. Every Saturday, they let me experiment with one new dish, whatever I wanted. Sometimes it flopped. Sometimes it sold out before noon. But they always insisted I try again. The cafe began to expand, not in size, but in soul. People brought their own stories. A couple who'd lost their child came every Sunday, always ordering the same tea and sitting at the same table. A man, recovering from a stroke, learned to speak again over muffins and daily crossword puzzles. A group of retired teachers gathered in the back corner every Friday with card games and knitted scarves. No one ever hurried here. That was the rule. One afternoon, a customer told me, "There's something in the air here. It feels like kindness." I didn't answer. I just smiled because what could I say? Kindness was all we had, and it was enough. As months passed, I began to let go of the kitchen a little more. I trained a young girl named Zoe to take over my morning prep shifts. She was quick, kind, and curious. She reminded me of Grace at that age. I stepped back slowly, watched the cafe move without me, and realized it didn't need me at the center. To be full of love, that was when I started thinking about the future. One evening, as we wiped down the tables and counted the last of the day's tips, I looked at Lily and Grace and said, "I won't be able to run this place forever, you know?" They both stopped moving. "I wanted to stay in the family," I continued. "When the time comes, I want you two to take over, not just the name, but everything this place stands for." Grace smiled first. "We were waiting for you to say that." Lily nodded. We've already started planning some ideas for expansion. But only if you're ready. I felt a lump form in my throat. I wasn't sure I'd ever be fully ready, but I trusted them. And I meant it. In the years that followed, I gradually handed over the reins. The cafe continued to grow under their care. They added a second location across town, then a tiny mobile truck that served festivals and farmers markets. But they never changed what mattered. They kept the shelves open, the air warm, the music soft. They kept the scones flaky and the coffee strong. They kept the soul. And they kept my name on the sign. Now I spend most mornings in the corner booth near the window. My spot, a cup of tea, a fresh croissant, a notebook I rarely write in anymore. I greet customers who don't know who I am. I listen to conversations that float by like wind chimes. Sometimes I watch Lily managing staff with a clipboard in hand. Other times I see Grace guiding a young designer through fabric samples near the wall. I don't interfere. I don't need to. They've got it. We never speak much about how it all began. Not about Michael. Not about the secrets, the betrayal, the pain that once threatened to bury us all. But the truth is, we don't need to revisit it because we didn't build our life on what he left behind. We built it on what we chose every day after, and that is everything. Looking back, I realize I never just opened a cafe. I built a home, not for the town, not even just for my daughters, but for the woman I had to become after everything I lost. A woman who didn't quit. A woman who learned that family isn't what you're given. It wasn't just a building or a business. It was the last piece of a puzzle I didn't know I was still solving. And in this little place, Carolyn's Hearth, I found not only my dream, I found the proof that love, real love, always finds its way back, even after everything. I used to think that betrayal was the worst thing that could happen to a person. That discovering a lie, especially one that unraveled everything you believed, was something you never quite recovered from. But now I see it differently. What broke me wasn't just the betrayal. It was the silence that followed. The emptiness. The question of who I would be when the dust settled. And no one was left standing beside me. But the truth is, I wasn't alone. Sometimes life hands you a story you didn't ask for. A heartbreak, a burden, a responsibility that feels too big for your hands. But what you do with it, that's what defines who you are. I wasn't the girl's biological mother. I wasn't part of their story from the beginning. But I showed up. I stayed. I chose them every day, and they chose me back. That's what I've learned. Family isn't always something you're born into. Sometimes it's the people who walk with you through the hardest moments, who make room for your grief, your growth, and your dreams, and still stay. You don't need perfect beginnings to build something beautiful. You just need love and the courage to give it without guarantees. And if you're lucky, if you love without expecting anything in return one day, that love might come back to you in the most unexpected, beautiful way. Just like it did for me.